Just days before U.S. President Joe Biden marks 1 year in the Oval Office, he's facing a number of challenges brought on by the pandemic. The latest being the Supreme Court rejecting a centerpiece of his COVID-19 response. His administration wanted to make it mandatory for employees at large businesses to be vaccinated or undergo weekly testing. Now, with more on the significance of this ruling, we're joined now by constitutional law expert and professor Joshua Kastenberg. Thanks for speaking with us today.
Well, thank you for having me on.
All right, so these would have been sweeping vaccine or test requirements affecting 84 million Americans. How did the Supreme Court, a conservative majority, arrive at this decision? And what does this mean for the Biden administration that they've rejected it?
Well, they didn't really arrive at this decision as a matter of constitutional law. They arrived at this decision as a matter of statutory interpretation. So in the early 1970s, the Congress set up OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. And OSHA is designed to promote workplace health and workplace safety. And so the Biden administration assumed that the agency could also create a vaccine mandate because the largest of American companies move products and goods and services into interstate and global commerce. And so it would affect 81 million Americans, but in a broader sense, it would have affected almost every American and probably our neighbors to the north and south. But what the Supreme Court found, the 6 justices, was that the statute creating OSHA was not so broad as to include vaccines. Now, they used a little bit of history in that finding, and they said OSHA's never had a vaccine mandate before, but frankly, the last time there was a global pandemic on this scale, it was 1919 during the Spanish influenza. Now, the court opened the door for states, cities, and Congress to do what Biden wanted to do through OSHA. Whether or not Congress can actually collectively arrive at a new law or an empowerment is open to question, but the individual state governments can probably do on their own what the Biden administration failed to do in that case, which was to convince the court.
Okay, so can the Biden administration, though, rework and rejig the workplace vaccine mandate and then maybe try to pass it again at a later date?
Yeah, so, as a matter of administrative power within the presidency, there are other things the Biden administration can try to do. So, for example, they can do what they didn't want to do, which is create vaccine mandates for travel on trains, buses, and airplanes. They probably couldn't stretch it to private cars and private modes of travel. So they could certainly try that. They could also try to expand what they've done through Medicare and Medicaid. Now, remember, they succeeded yesterday in convincing the Supreme Court on a 5-4 decision about mandatory vaccines of healthcare workers. I suppose they could try to take that further and go to first responders, federal contractors that work in promoting the health through federal dollars, being funded by federal dollars. But that would be much more of a patchwork than what they had tried to do through OSHA.
Right, and Professor Kastenberg, this rejection from the country's highest court comes as Biden's approval rating is almost as low as Donald Trump's was at this point in his term. So, what's the reaction been like from workers and businesses to the Supreme Court's decision?
Well, I certainly don't think it helps convince Republicans to back Joe Biden, but it might solidify Democratic support that was fracturing to support Joe Biden, because even the progressives who are not fond of him in the Democratic Party now realize, of course, that elections have consequences, and those consequences include who gets to sit on the Supreme Court and on the other judicial positions. And this decision that the U.S. Supreme Court issued is a classic reminder that, elections have consequences. I think the other thing, of course, that Biden's going to push for is a new Voting Rights Act to counter the voting suppression laws that certain states are pushing forward. But this is just solidifying the camps, the pro-Biden and anti-Biden camps, the Supreme Court decision of yesterday. So I don't think it moves the needle one way or the other in and of itself in its popularity, but it gives his opponents talking points.
There's never a dull day in U.S. politics. Thank you so much for your time today and your insight, Professor.
Certainly isn't.
Thank you for your time
very much.
That's constitutional law expert Joshua Kastenberg.